$65 billion. Gone. In less than a year, 20,000 employees wiped out. Retirement savings erased overnight. Pension funds zeroed. And the people who did it? They were on the cover of Fortune magazine, 6 years in a row, named America's most innovative company. This is not a story about a company that failed. This is a story about a company that lied, systematically, brilliantly, ruthlessly, and almost got away with it. (1985), Houston, Texas. Two gas pipeline companies merge. Nobody cares. It's boring. It's pipes. It moves gas from A to B. The company is called Enron, and for a few years, that's exactly what it is. Just a pipeline company, nothing special. Then a man named Kenneth Lay has an idea. What if energy wasn't just a product you moved through pipes, but something you could trade, like stocks, like commodities, like anything else on Wall Street? The US government had just deregulated the energy markets, which meant energy prices could now fluctuate freely, which meant, if you were smart enough, you could bet on those prices and make a fortune. Lay saw the opportunity before almost anyone else. He hired the smartest traders he could find, built one of the most aggressive trading floors in America, and turned Enron into something completely new, an energy trading company. By the mid-90s, Enron wasn't just moving gas. It was trading natural gas, electricity, broadband, water rights. Anything it could put a price on. And Wall Street loved it. Stock price climbing, revenue growing, analysts calling it the future of energy. But then, Lay made his most important hire, a man who would take Enron from big to legendary, and eventually to prison. His name was Jeffrey Skilling.
Welcome, everyone, to Enron Gas Services Solutions Day.
Jeff Skilling was not a normal executive. Harvard MBA, razor sharp, brutally competitive, the kind of guy who thought he was the smartest person in every room. He usually was. Skilling had one belief that drove everything. Traditional companies were dinosaurs. Physical assets, factories, pipelines, infrastructure were liabilities. What mattered was intellectual capital, ideas, talent, financial engineering. He called it the asset-light model. Instead of owning things, Enron would trade things. Instead of building infrastructure, Enron would create markets on paper. Genius. On paper. But here's where Skilling's brilliance started to curdle. He pushed the SEC to let Enron use something called mark-to-market accounting. Here's what that means in plain English. Normally, a company records revenue when it actually receives the money. Mark-to-market let Enron record revenue the moment a deal was signed, even if the money wouldn't arrive for 10 years, even if it never arrived at all. The SEC approved it in 1992, and Enron immediately started using it aggressively. Sign a deal today, book the projected profits today, worry about actually making that money later or never. It was legal. It was standard practice, in a limited form. Enron just took it to an extreme nobody had seen before. And it worked, because as long as Enron kept signing new deals, the revenue kept growing, the stock kept climbing, the analysts kept cheering. Nobody looked too hard at whether the deals were actually profitable, because the numbers looked incredible. By 2000, Enron had $111 billion in reported revenues. It was the 7th largest company in America. Its stock hit $90 per share. Everyone wanted in. But behind the scenes, a second man was quietly building the machine that would make all of this possible. His name was Andrew Fastow, and he was Enron's CFO, Chief Financial Officer. His job was to manage Enron's money. What he actually did was hide the truth about it. Here's the problem Enron had by the late 90s. They were booking massive revenues, but they were also taking on massive debt. Because trading energy at scale requires capital, and capital means borrowing money. The more debt Enron had on its books, The worse its credit rating, the worse its credit rating, the harder to borrow more money, the harder to borrow, the harder to keep the machine running. Fasto's solution was creative. He created a network of special-purpose entities, essentially fake companies. On paper, they were independent. In reality, they existed for one purpose: to absorb Enron's debt and hide it from the balance sheet. He called them names like LJM Cayman, Raptor, Jedi. Yes, Jedi. Named after Star Wars. These entities would buy Enron's bad assets, which made Enron's books look clean, which kept the stock price up, which kept the credit rating up, which kept the borrowing going. It was a financial perpetual motion machine, with one problem: it was fraud. Because these independent companies, Fasto secretly controlled them, and he was personally profiting from them, to the tune of $30 million in management fees, while simultaneously serving as Enron's CFO. He was on both sides of every deal. The board knew and approved it anyway. The auditors knew and signed off anyway. Arthur Andersen, one of the largest accounting firms in the world, was Enron's auditor. They earned $52 million from Enron in 2000 alone, half in audit fees, half in consulting fees. You don't bite the hand that feeds you $52 million a year. So nobody asked hard questions. The machine kept running, the stock kept climbing, and 20,000 employees kept putting their retirement savings into Enron stock because their executives told them it was the safest investment they could make. Let that sink in. To understand why nobody blew the whistle sooner, you need to understand what it was like to work at Enron. Skilling ran the company like a tournament. Every year, the bottom 15% of performers were fired. He called it rank and yank. Employees were rated on a scale of 1 to 5 by their peers. Low scorers were out, no exceptions. The result? Nobody questioned anything, nobody raised concerns, nobody admitted a deal was going badly, because admitting failure meant being ranked at the bottom. And being ranked at the bottom meant losing your job. So instead, bad deals were hidden, losses were buried, and everyone performed confidence, even as the foundation cracked. Skilling also cultivated a cult of arrogance. Enron recruited exclusively from top MBA programs: Harvard, Wharton, Kellogg. The message was clear: you are the elite. Normal rules don't apply to the smartest people in the room. One famous story. A reporter once asked Skilling why Enron didn't publish a detailed financial balance sheet. Skilling's response: "We don't want to show our hand to our competitors." Translation: "We can't show you what's actually in there." The journalist, Bethany McLean from Fortune magazine, wasn't satisfied. She started asking harder questions, and in March 2001, she published an article with a simple, devastating headline: "Is Enron overpriced?" When Skilling found out, he called her on the phone and called her unethical. Then he went on CNBC and called anyone who doubted Enron's stock price an arsehole. Live on air. That should have been a red flag. For most people, it wasn't. The stock was still flying, the analysts were still bullish, and Enron's executives were still selling. Behind closed doors, the machine was breaking down. The Raptor entities, the vehicles Fasto used to hide debt, were losing money fast. The broadband business Enron had bet billions on, collapsing because the dot-com bubble had burst. Enron had also made disastrous bets on international projects, a water company in the UK, a power plant in India, both hemorrhaging cash. But none of this was visible to the public, because none of it was on the balance sheet. In August 2001, Jeff Skilling shocked everyone. He resigned. After only 6 months as CEO, officially, personal reasons. He cashed out over $60 million in stock before leaving. Ken Lay stepped back in as CEO and told investors, everything is fine. It was not fine. 1 month later, Sharon Watkins, an Enron vice president, sent Ken Lay an anonymous letter. 7 pages, single-spaced. It described, in detail, exactly how the accounting was fraudulent, exactly how the SPEs were structured to hide losses, exactly why Enron was going to implode. Ken Lay handed the letter to Enron's lawyers to investigate. The lawyers Enron paid, who worked for Enron. They concluded, no problems found. Watkins would later testify before Congress. She became known as one of the most important whistleblowers in American history. But in August 2001, nobody listened. Then came September 11th. The entire country was focused elsewhere. Enron bought one more month of breathing room, but the math doesn't care about timing, and by October 2001, the numbers couldn't be hidden anymore. October 16, 2001, Enron reports a $638 million quarterly loss and announces a $1.2 billion reduction in shareholder equity. Wall Street freezes. The SEC opens an investigation. Within days, Enron's credit rating is downgraded. The moment the rating drops below investment grade, the SPEs are triggered. Enron is required to repay billions in debt. Immediately, money it doesn't have. November 8th, Enron restates 5 years of earnings. $586 million in profits never existed. The stock, which was at $90 a year ago, crashes below $1. November 28th. Credit rating, junk. Enron is locked out of the credit markets. December 2nd, 2001. Enron files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At the time, the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history. 20,000 people lost their jobs that day. Employees who had been told to keep their savings in Enron stock and couldn't sell it because of lockout periods lost everything. Some lost $1 million in retirement savings. Some lost $2 million. People who had worked 30 years, starting over at 60, while executives had been selling their stock for months. The investigations came fast. The Department of Justice, the SEC Congress. Arthur Anderson, Enron's auditor, was found guilty of obstruction of justice for shredding Enron documents after the investigation began. One of the oldest and largest accounting firms in the world, dissolved. 85,000 employees, gone. Andrew Fastow, the CFO, the architect of the fraud, pleaded guilty, 10 years in federal prison, forfeited $23.8 million. Jeffrey Skilling, found guilty on 19 counts of fraud and conspiracy, originally sentenced to 24 years, later reduced to 14, released in 2019. Ken Lay, convicted on 6 counts of fraud and conspiracy. He never went to prison. He died of a heart attack in July 2006 before sentencing. Because of his death, his conviction was vacated. Under US law, if you die before your appeals are exhausted, your conviction is erased. Enron didn't happen because a few bad people slipped through the cracks. Enron happened because an entire system looked the other way. The board approved the fraud. The auditors signed off on the fraud. The banks funded the fraud. The analysts cheered the fraud. The regulators missed the fraud. Everyone had an incentive to keep believing. Because as long as the stock was going up, everyone was getting paid. The Enron scandal directly led to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002. The most sweeping reform of corporate accountability in American history. CEOs now have to personally certify the accuracy of their financial statements. Auditors are now prohibited from also consulting for the same company. Because of Enron, the rules changed. But here's what keeps analysts up at night. The pressure to perform, the incentive to hide bad news, the culture of arrogance that silences whistleblowers. Those things didn't change. The next Enron won't look like Enron. It'll look legitimate, innovative, celebrated. 6 years running, America's most innovative company. Sound familiar? If you made it this far, you already think differently about business than most people. Subscribe to Empira.